Over a very short period, Jordan Peterson became one of the most prominent and controversial social commentators of our time. It is difficult to give a general take on him because there are two very different sides to him. There is the interesting, charismatic, honest intellectual who isn't afraid to tackle controversial topics and whose self-help psychology book and lectures have clearly made a difference in the lives of many.
Two of the guys that worked behind the meat counter came out to talk to me, and independently, and they'd both been reading my books and watching my lectures, and one of them said, he found the books really helpful and that it was helping him put his life together. Every time someone comes up to me, and that's happening maybe 100 times a week or something like that, and tells me one of these stories about how they put their life together, it's like, I'm absolutely thrilled about that.
But then there's the other Jordan Peterson, who, apart from the amply explored gender pronoun controversy that brought him to prominence, has expressed many regressive ideas that were received with legitimate contempt. Take his Vice interview about women in the workplace.
Here's a question. Can men and women work together in the workplace?
Yes, I do it.
How do you know?
Because I work with a lot of women.
Right. Well, it's been happening for 40 years? And things are deteriorating very rapidly at the moment in terms of the relationships between men and women.
Do you think men and women can work in the workplace together?
I don't know.
Without sexual harassment?
We'll see. We don't know what the rules are. Like what? Here's a rule.
How
about no makeup in the workplace?
Why would that be a rule?
Why should you wear makeup in the workplace? Isn't that sexually provocative? Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't use sexual displays in the workplace. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that that is what they're doing, and that is what they're doing.
Do you feel like a serious woman who does not want sexual harassment in the workplace, do you feel like if she wears makeup in the workplace that she is somewhat being critical?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do think that.
The question of whether women belong in the workplace alongside men and whether they deserve the dignity of a respectful and safe work environment is a settled one, and it is not a trivial intellectual exercise. To even float the idea that women might not belong there is to turn the clock back on critical social progress that we've made in our society. Peterson has also made worse comments about feminism and Islam.
Why don't the feminists complain about Saudi Arabia? It's like...
Before I get into the absurd answer that Peterson gives to this, it's important to note that the question itself contains what is known in arguments as the loaded question fallacy, meaning the question is loaded with a false premise which makes answering it correctly impossible. You cannot explain why feminists do not criticize the mistreatment of women in Saudi Arabia, because feminists do criticize the mistreatment of women in Saudi Arabia.
Gad Saad, who's this guy at Concordia who is in a business school, so he can actually say what he thinks now and then. He tweeted yesterday, he tweeted to the Women's March, because there's a little Twitter thing, you could do that, I suppose, for the organizers, and he said, why don't you go to the Middle East and have a nice march against Saudi Arabia and see how that works out for you? It's like, so you think, well, why not? Like, why not? Why are the radical leftists who are so much for rights everywhere? That's what they say. It's like, why not complain about that? Well, how about this? The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
All right, let's play this game. You, Jordan Peterson, are a crusader for free speech. So how come you're not spending your time and energy protesting against the North Korean government, which is far worse when it comes to free speech than Western academia? Is it because you have some common cause with the North Korean regime? Of course not. We know that you object to the totalitarianism that exists in North Korea. You're just focused on free speech issues that affect your society. Likewise, of course feminists object to the mistreatment of women in many parts of the world. But like all grassroots social movements, they're focused on the mistreatment of women that affects their societies. And the fact that women are being treated worse in other places does not mean that they cannot focus on the issues that they face. But it gets worse. Here's how Peterson explains why feminists supposedly do not criticize Islam.
The feminists, it's got to be because Muslims right now are higher up on the victim hierarchy than them. So even if it's way over there, they're not allowed to speak out against.
I think it's their unconscious wish for brutal male domination.
I don't think so.
Man,
I like that. That's fun.
He again raised the same speculation in a Facebook post and in another speech. Now, before I explain why this ridiculous idea is actually dangerous, let us first describe the reality. What we are actually seeing among not just feminists but social justice advocates more broadly is sympathy with ordinary Muslims. That's because Muslims in Western countries are an abused and beleaguered minority, who are followed around and intimidated by right-wing fanatics with guns,
carrying firearms and an anti-Islamic stance, shadowed Muslim families on the sidewalk outside the Islamic Center of Irving Saturday.
Today, a group of protesters with guns showed up outside of a mosque in Richardson.
Tension is rising in Irving. An anti-Muslim group released the names and addresses of Muslims
who have their mosques protested and sometimes even torched.
A suspect involved in a fire that caused significant damage to a mosque on Sunday night has been arrested.
Who are vilified by our political leaders.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
I would not advocate that we put a Muslim in charge of this nation. I absolutely would not agree with that.
Okay, this man, I like this guy.
From White Plains. Amen. Okay. Problem in this country. It's called Muslims. That's my question. When can we get rid of
We're going to be looking at a lot of different things. And, you know, a lot of people are saying that, and a lot of people are saying that bad things are happening out there. We're going to be looking at that and plenty of other things.
And who are attacked and even murdered by Islamophobes.
We are also learning more tonight about the terror north of the border. The attack targeting Muslims inside a mosque, killing 6 worshipers, injuring 8 others.
Police say they've foiled a serious threat to carry out a massacre at a women's march. 27-year-old Christopher Cleary bowed his head and wept after his arrest for threatening to kill as many girls as I see.
Someone with the social reach that Jordan Peterson has needs to be a lot more responsible with the ideas that he puts in the minds of his followers, because his statements really risk increasing hostility towards the most vulnerable communities in our society. Another problem with Peterson is lack of consistency. He criticizes academic departments for lack of ideological diversity, but he himself was at one point developing his own blacklist of courses to limit student exposure to ideas that he didn't like.
Students will be able to cut and paste a course description and paste it into the analysis box on this website along with the professor's name and the course's name and the discipline and the university. And so we should be able to produce a listing of every university and every course that people are willing to participate in analyzing across North America, and set up a list of courses and professors and disciplines that should be avoided. And so maybe we can starve them out at their source, and that's what should happen.
He heavily emphasizes the importance of free speech and wants the freedom to choose the pronouns he uses for others and the liberty to level harsh criticism, but he's so uncomfortable extending that same freedom to his critics that he actually threatens to sue them. Or take his description of women's studies departments.
But just go online and look at a dozen women's studies websites. Just read them. You can see what they say. They produce political activists, and their goal is to restructure the patriarchy. Well, what's the patriarchy? Well, the patriarchy is Western civilization. And what does restructure mean? That's easy. It means tear it down and destroy it. Why? Because it's a brutish system that's predicated on nothing but oppression. It's nothing but a tyranny in the eyes of the radical women's studies types. Heterosexuality, that's a tyranny. Capitalism, that's a tyranny. Democracy, well, that doesn't even exist, and even if it did, it would be a tyranny.
Come on. I mean, look, if these academic departments were actually teaching hatred of democracy and calling for the destruction of Western civilization, I would happily join the resistance against them. But this really strikes me as fear-mongering. Feminism, and social justice advocacy more broadly, is calling for more democracy, specifically more inclusive democracy so that no one is marginalized because of their identity. But, like I said, Peterson cannot be squeezed into a box. There is a tremendous upside to him that engages in discussions with sincerity, and when he's confronted with his own ignorance or contradictions, he doesn't evade them, he owns up to them.
The problem, one of the problems is that I'm an ignorant man, and there's lots of things that I don't know. And I don't understand Islam. I don't know enough about it to be an intelligent commentary on it.
Should they be able to deny making a cake for a black couple if they don't like black people?
Allowed to? Probably. That doesn't mean it's right.
Okay, so then we had the civil rights movement where they said black people, you had to serve them in your restaurants and stuff like that, and it did work and it did make our society better, but would you argue that that still wasn't right?
No, that was right.
Why is that different to now if you didn't want to make a cake for black people?
Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not different.
Yeah.
Maybe I was wrong about that.
All in all, he has commendable ideas that are worth listening to, but also has objectionable ideas that are most definitely worth critiquing.